Hello, this is Brother Joseph. I wanted to cover briefly the latest act by the Michigan legislators. Modification basically of a bill, hates crime bill. And what it does is it criminalizes the preaching of the full gospel. That's what it does. I want to cover that briefly. So I do have a printout of the bill right here. Let's see if I can keep everything in focus. My camera's not exactly high quality, so please move with me here with this low technology. So we can see that House Bill number 4474, and we can see this is hate crime if that person maliciously, turning the page, intentionally or does any of the following to an individual based in whole or in part or in actual or perceived characteristics of the individual listed under subsection, regardless of the existence of any other motivating factors. So it's going to get into this, and the actual or perceived characteristics of another individual referenced under subsection include all the following. We have religion, and we have sexual orientation, and we have gender identity or expression. How does that work? I'm a traditional Catholic. That's a religion. And they want sexual orientation and gender identity or expression in this same category. Well, my religion cites and frames those of sexual orientation category and gender identity or expression category as sinful, as violating what God created, trying to proclaim God themselves by changing His creation. How does that work? This whole legislation is violating my religion. These people here are violating my religion. How do you govern that with this bill? How does that work? Because as you look at this bill, it's going to somewhat extend a bit in the language. If any of the following conditions apply, a person who violates subsection is guilty of a felony punishable by imprisonment for not more than 5 years, or by a fine of not more than $10,000. Gets into bodily injury, some of the things that is in here. And it even has a section over here, and this is concerning a hate crime may bring about a civil action. We're looking at $25,000. As used in this section, gender identity expression means being perceived as having a gender-related, just perception just works here, expression, whether or not associated with an individual's assigned sex at birth. Again, isn't that already contemptuous for those who are traditionally Catholic? Intimidate means a willful course, and now we're defining terms, of conduct involving repeated or continuing harassment of another. What is harassment? What does that mean? Of another individual that would cause a reasonable individual to feel terrorized. Well, haven't we seen that expression before? I'm terrorized by what? By words. Frightened or threatened. Don't they say words are violence? And don't people just believe that now? Intimidation does not include constitutionally protected individual or conduct that serves a legitimate purpose. You get into that, and you find that this loose use of language is there. It's there. How does this work? This doesn't work. This doesn't work at all. So, the gospel, we look here, In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created everything in 6 days. He rested on the seventh. And he created them on the sixth day. He created mankind in his own image. So mankind is sacred. We can't mess with what he created. And what did he create? He created male and female. 2 sexes. The things that we want to say are gender, is it gender being a linguistic term, are sinful. Sin. It's sodomy. It's the very thing that God condemns later on in Genesis chapter 18 when he destroys those cities. And we're to be like God, condemning what he condemns and bringing up to virtue what he considers virtuous. In chapter 2, we see in more detail the creation of the man and the woman. And when he creates them, he joins them and says here, that this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she has been taken from out of man. When they fall into the temptation and sin of the serpent tempts them to be like God without knowing God, to just proclaim themselves as God in a kind of way. God declares the curses that fall on him for doing such a sinful act of trying to make themselves God. And when he condemns them, he condemns the serpent, he condemns the woman and the man. Only 2. Now, this is relevant also because later on in the gospel we see that Jesus restores that image to us. And he becomes head of his church. In Ephesians, we see that the church and the union with Christ is very relevant to salvation. In chapter 5, when he talks about wives and husbands and how they are to be to each other, he's talking about something greater than just how one treats another. It's for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is head of the church. And later he talks about the woman being like the church. It is the church. Later he explains why these terms are used the way they are. Listen to this in verse 31. Therefore a man shall, and now he's quoting the, he's explaining the union in more detail. He's quoting what we saw in Genesis chapter 2. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. That explains why that connection is being made here. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. This is the gospel, our salvation. So when we mess with this gender thing, we're messing with the gospel. Okay? There's only man and woman. The gender category, which was hijacked from linguistics, is there to try and throw into the social circle diabolical actions that were condemned by God. Sodomy. Okay? It's anti-gospel. Those are the things we condemn. We condemn what the Lord condemned. And God condemned Sodom and the other cities for what they were doing. The whole pride category, the whole alphabet category, the trans cult category, that is sodomy. So the legislation wants to bring laws in, put this act of wickedness under the umbrella of hate crimes, criminalizing the expression of the gospel. The room is there to do it. That's what they're doing, trying to criminalize that. Well, guess what? I'm a traditional Catholic. I'm going to live, I'm going to act, and I'm going to speak as a traditional Catholic within my faith. and I will not submit to this law.